So, Tom, what did you think to this episode of Ahsoka where we totally didn't retrace ground and we totally didn't waste time?
Damn, I'm not even sure how to follow that up. I was like, wow, because I didn't get your thoughts about this episode ahead of time, so I thought I was going to
Yeah,
be the brutal one, but
yeah.
after that intro, I don't think I can quite match that.
Yeah, what's your overall thoughts, Tom?
Uh, uh, like at the moment, I'm just mentally editing the episodes as we go along now because episodes one, two, and three felt like they could have been act one of a 2 hour film. Like you could have
Hmm.
cut these 2 hours of episodes down to 45 minutes
Yeah.
and probably not missed as much. uh,
Yeah. My overall thoughts are it's wasting time, this show,
mm,
time that it hasn't got. It's a feeling I have with Star Wars show in general at the moment, and that is that they kind of hold you hostage with the fact they are Star Wars.
mm,
Like I think it's perfectly okay. Like you think about maybe Game of Thrones, or you think about Breaking Bad, and with most people before they were the hit phenomenon, you tended to hear the phrase, didn't you? You need to watch one or two episodes for it to get going.
yeah.
Quite a common phrase with these Star Wars shows. It's like the biggest one for me was Andor, but like I felt it with Kenobi, and I felt it with I didn't feel it with season one of The Mandalorian, but I felt it a little bit with season two, and very much with season three. And that is, it's almost like they're holding you hostage and saying you'll watch 6 episodes for those last two, bombastic ones because it's Star Wars. And I don't feel like it's fair to say you need to watch 6 or 7 episodes for it to get going. And that's what I feel like we're going down this track with Ahsoka. Like this episode for me, like I've watched it 3 times, and I was looking at my
Really?
notes, and I was looking at my notes, and I was like, God, am I just not watching it? There's barely anything in my notes, and I've watched it 3 times, and I'm like, no, that's all there is in the episode. It was, there just wasn't a lot going on for me, and what we got was like for a good chunk of it was just retreads of iconic things in Star Wars that were done better the first time around. That's how I felt.
I was like, tell us how you really feel. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I've only watched the episode once, because watching it twice feels like a waste of time. I was like, what did I miss? Barely much really happened.
Yeah.
Uh,
But that was me, Tom. That was me, mate. Like I was like, my notes are so small. What, I must not be watching this right to have so little to say.
this
You
might
know?
be the first podcast we get done in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Whoa, whoa. I just heard the voices as if millions of people just cried out all at once. I fucking hate callbacks. Lazy
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. So, what did you like then, Tom, about this episode? Was there anything that you liked?
So this is just gonna be me on every episode, rinse and repeat. I'm gonna be like, the VFX are still outstanding, especially on the planet with the whales. To think this is a TV show. Oh my god, the level of quality they can bring to it. It's a shame they can't do it with the writing.
Right, what you need to do now, pal, is cut this out of the podcast. Cut that little clip out of the podcast and just splice it in when we do future ones.
I'm gonna do that for next week. I'm gonna leave it in for here, and that's gonna be our running joke. But
Yeah, yeah, do it.
but again, the VFX. When you think of this as a TV show, to see the quality of visual effects that they can bring that are movie quality to an
Yeah.
episode of TV, it's just fantastic.
I felt that when I saw the fleet, and I felt that when I saw Ahsoka's ship. I can't remember what it's called, the like Dory fish
Yeah.
ship, the Jedi ship. I felt that too. I was like, wow, this is a cut above everything you sort of see
And
on
then
today's TV.
they take it up a notch when they go planet side and they're dodging through the whales because from a visual effects point, there's so much to go into that, like simulating the clouds, the rain droplets, the freaking whales, the ship.
Yeah.
It's like, man, what a headache. And for a TV show as well. So I think that sometimes what starts to blur the line a little with Star Wars is we get the same quality of visual effects and the same writing actually. So like Disney's been pretty consistent with the writing and the quality of visual effects for Star Wars.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Um,
sorry, one last thing for me. Other things I
yeah,
liked. I mean, Ahsoka showed a bit more character, and there's a smile.
yeah. I felt that. Um, but I'm still not convinced Rosario is
Mm.
Ahsoka. She's so cold, and I don't know if that's just down to the directing now. Like, if that's just how she's been told to be. Like, be a stoic Jedi master, and maybe she's watched the prequels and watched Qui-Gon and Mace Windu and stuff, and is trying to emulate that. But
The odd thing
yeah,
is, though, is that the directors are different for each episode so far, I think.
yeah,
So that's where I found it tricky to be like, oh, it's the way she's being directed. It could be that Filoni's grabbed them all together and be like, this is how a character should be. Like, go.
yeah. In terms of like what I liked, I always liked the score. I'm like you with the visual effects. I'm always like that with the score. I genuinely think Kevin Kinner should be scoring Star Wars. He should sort of take over from John Williams. I think
Mm.
he knows the sound and he knows the sound of the universe. Him and Gorickson, they need to collaborate. They'd wreak havoc. With these Star Wars shows. I liked seeing Sabine actually doing a bit of training. I think that's something that's a little bit underappreciated sometimes. But I like seeing her train, and what I like about seeing her train is I like seeing her fail.
Wow.
And I don't mean that in a horrible way. I like seeing that she's not this Mary Sue who can just do everything on command and is so amazing. I really liked how Hugh Yang was like, not bad but not good. It's gonna make, when she actually does something impressive, it's gonna make it feel a bit more earned for me. Like the scene with the cup, like I was cool that she didn't even get a wiggle out of it. It was great,
Mm.
because it's gonna make that first sort of use of the force feel a bit more earned and a bit more meaningful for me. I like Sabine a little bit more in this episode. I think she felt a little bit more like her animated self. I still think the actress though is so flat. I really don't have a lot of good things to say about the actress. She's like a flat tire. Her performance is it feels half-assed.
I mean, we don't have tires in Star Wars, so
Well,
maybe we could have used a better analogy, like as wooden as the sword she was swinging. Like,
yeah. Well,
come
when we
on,
get onto things
Liam.
we didn't. Yeah, when we get onto things we didn't like those swords. Yeah, I like Sabine a bit more. I think Hugh Yang is always great. I think David Tennant is killing it.
Mm.
He brings that much needed spark and that much needed life
Mm.
to sort of that group. The sort of like the R2D2 C3PO effect, like just giving that little bit of comedy and that little bit of lightheartedness. Because if you just had Ahsoka and Sabine, it would be so wooden like those swords. It'd just be really flat.
He is their comedic relief, and he does
Yeah.
shoulder a lot of that burden. And he has been the scene stealer.
Yeah.
They switch him back on. He gets a laugh almost right away.
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
should call him the joke machine.
Yeah. I liked Hera too. I think maybe in this episode the initial shock wore off for me, about the transition from
Mm.
animated to live action. Um, Hera, when I saw Hera, I was a little bit more like, oh yeah, I can kind of, and maybe in the way she was written too, it just came across. Oh yeah, that I kind of believe that that's the same character. From the animated show. I'm not too keen on her being this sort of super important general though for some reason. Like she never like even in the animated show, she always struck me as sort of like a low level insurgency leader, not this sort of like like Leia and
Yeah.
Mothma are like these sort of they're the big dogs in charge. Hera never struck me like that, and it kind of felt like they were treating her in that regard. They were it was sort of like she had the same sort of status, and that didn't work for me. But
Well, I actually disagree a bit with that. Purely
Yeah,
because at Rebels, of course, we haven't seen her reach the heights of a generalship, so to speak, because it's before the main series is kicked off. That's probably where a lot of people have earned their stripes. So
yeah.
she's at Scarif, she's at the second Death Star. It's like, okay, I get it. She would have earned it over the course of the rebellion
I
because
suppose that's a good point, actually. When you word it like that, because I forgot that she fights in the second battle of the Death Star, and she's at Scarif.
so in Rebels, it's like, yeah, this is just the beginning of her journey, so to speak. It's like
Yeah,
saying, oh, seeing a new hope, and then cutting to like, later down the line. It's like, oh, it's General Skywalker. Like, what have you done? Like, we've missed some important context, even though after A New Hope, it's like, yeah, I'd make him a general after blowing up the Death Star.
yeah. Well, yeah. I suppose that makes sense. I mean, like, yeah, makes sense. I mean, like, 3 years has passed between A New Hope and Empire, and there's a lot more years passed between Return of the Jedi and Ahsoka. So yeah,
I
yeah,
did
makes sense. She
enjoy
been bumped up.
seeing, sorry, I did enjoy seeing Mon Mothma return. Uh,
Yeah,
I think some of my favorite elements, and I usually hate these things, but it's seeing the Republic running with some of the characters we're familiar with that should be showing up.
yeah,
Uh, it's weird, but understandable why Mon Mothma's actress shows up.
yeah,
And why we don't get as much Luke, Leia, and Han. Because there are obvious reasons for that, which it's almost like a weird elephant in the room you have to
yeah,
constantly be addressing. But I did enjoy seeing her back just for continuity purposes.
yeah.
Uh, what else was there?
That is literally all I've
Yeah.
got for likes.
Okay. Misery guts. Let's get over to things we didn't like.
Okay. Well, I absolutely, I don't hate. Actually, I was going to say absolutely hate. I'm not a fan of them really trying to flesh out these lightsaber forms and the sort of the lightsaber training. I get that it lends a certain credibility of the world building, but I think it's a very slippery slope to go down, and you can start like really scrutinizing it. And for me, like I always liked the original, like in the old lore, there was the seven forms, and they all had a very well, actually nine, but like there were seven like classic lightsaber forms, and they all had a brief description, and you just got a very general sense of what each form could do. Like Shicho could deal with multiple opponents, Mukashi was like fencing, Sarisu defense, Ataru was pure offense, Gemso grounded and using your strength and sort of mixing it offense, and form 6 9 man, mixing it all together, Yo.
Ooh.
But you had that, and you just got the forms were never fleshed out to like katas.
What's that? Did you say
And
Cereso? Cerezo? What?
Sarisu.
Yeah, that's the one. I was like, what? You know where you see these things and you know you've only ever read it and never said it into reality,
Yeah.
like spoke it as like, oh, I could spell it, I couldn't pronounce it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but you had these forms, and they all had this sort of general idea of what they did, but they never went like wholly in depth. And I liked that because for me, lightsabers are a bit of a mystical weapon, and there's always sort of been this separation between regular people in Star Wars and people who can use lightsabers.
Hmm.
There was meant to be sort of like you obviously had to have the Force and be able to listen to it to be able to wield a lightsaber. They even addressed that in Rebels when Sabine's trying to use the dark saber, and in The Mandalorian when he's trying to use the lightsaber. Like they've always been this kind of mystical weapon, and sort of seeing Sabine do these very sort of standard, I think it was Kendo or Kenjutsu. She was sort of emulating. It just kind of killed some of the mysticism for me. And using Bokken as well, that really got on my nerves, which is the wooden sword. It's like the whole point of a lightsaber is that it's not a sword, that it's more difficult to wield. So why are you training to use a lightsaber
Okay,
with a wooden sword? It
let
really got on my nerves.
Let's breathe, Liam. Breathe. Let's close our eyes. Let's put on the little
Yeah,
shock helmet and just
yeah.
breathe and feel the force around us. Uh, so the sword, I understand. You need the wooden sword. Question: what else would they be training with?
They should be training with training lightsabers because
Shut
even in
up,
the
Liam.
prequels, even in the prequels, the children had training lightsabers. The idea of a lightsaber is like I don't know what the new law is on them,
Okay,
but in the old law that they produced a gyroscopic effect. So if you trained to use a sword, it wouldn't transfer over to a lightsaber because it felt entirely different.
how did training lightsabers work with? Is her name Tina Cal? It was Jason Solo's partner in the New Jedi Order.
I can't remember. Does he cut? Does she like cut one of her limbs off or something?
How'd that work out for her? Yeah, training lightsabers.
Well, they're only meant to burn you, aren't they?
Well, he certainly burned her arm off.
That's my point. Is like I would have preferred. It. So instead of doing these sort of movements with these wooden bokken, I would have preferred more Ahsoka explaining why a lightsaber is different to a sword. You know what I mean? Instead, like because we've never had that in a live action show or in a film where someone sort of sits back and it's like you can't use this like you're wielding a vibroblade. It's not the same. You have to listen to the force. You have to flow with the movement of the blade and stuff. I would have found that more interesting than rehashing A New Hope because it really, I hate that putting the blast shield on, putting the stupid helmet on and making yourself blind.
I
And learning to, because it takes, I always thought, and I know George did it in the prequels now, so I can't really complain that it's Filoni because George did it. But I always thought that exercise was Obi-Wan
a dick.
being really, well, no, being really, that was Obi-Wan improvising training. Like the remote, the little ball, I always assumed was like some sort of parlor game with Han. And the blast shield is obviously, it's not a Jedi thing, it's on Han's ship. It's obviously some kind of like, I don't know, bomb diffusal thing or something like that. And I just thought that was something that Obi-Wan had sort of come up with on the fly.
Hmm.
But now it's George did it, so I can't actually blame this show. But now it's in now it's in the show again, and it's just I don't know. It's the same thing. I think what annoys me the most is this is the exact same thing. Why can't Star Wars do something new? Why does it always have to be let's just see people fighting blind and having to listen to the force and stuff? It's the same repeat. It's the same with the dogfight. Like I really hated that dogfight. I thought it was boring. Like this happens in A New Hope. We have the tail gunner in the cargo ship. It just felt like rehashing old ground. I hated the fighters too. I thought they looked so stupid. You know, the Spitfires, the sort of World War II looking starfighters. I was like, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of Doctor Who.
Mm.
There's an episode in Doctor Who where the Daleks invade during World War II, and the Doctor, not the Doctor, like this robot that the Daleks have made that then turns cloak on them, like converts some Spitfires, some World War II Spitfires, so that they can go into space and attack the Dalek ship.
God.
And yeah, well, that's what those starfighters felt like to me. That's what it reminded me of, and I couldn't help but laugh when I saw them. Because I was like, Doctor Who gets away with it because it's supposed to be goofy. Like part of its charm is that it's a bit naff looking and that. Don't do that in Star Wars, you know.
That's a bit extreme. Just to rewind on a few things then. So speaking about the training scene with Sabine and Ahsoka,
Yeah.
I think the wooden sword makes sense just from an audience point of view. It's like it just makes sense for an audience to be like, okay, they're training with wooden swords to emulate lightsaber training. Because I don't think they've ever established with a lightsaber that you can tone it down.
Oh yeah, this is stuff that's like in the old lore. I mean, the lore on lightsabers might change because I mean, originally in A New Hope, the rule was, if George is to be believed, the rule was that it was heavy.
Yeah.
Like the energy blade was really heavy, and you needed the force to help you sort of move it around. And then when the prequels came about, it was that the lightsaber sort of generated this gyroscopic effect. So if you swung it, you had to know how to sort of flow the movement through, and that's why the Jedi sort of twirled and sort of flourished around a lot, because you had to sort of move with the flow of this gyroscopic effect. And that's why like Mace was so dangerous, and people who did use Yuyo were dangerous, because to be able to sort of stop halfway through an attack and change direction was like supposedly like really difficult.
I mean,
So that's old lore. Like the new lore could, it could be anything. I haven't read the new stuff. Disney
Obi-Wan
lost me at The Force Awakens.
Obi-Wan knew how to slow down Form 5 pretty well. Stopped Anakin
Yeah.
halfway through his movement. But like, as I was saying, I understand you just need a simple translation for your audience. I'm not sure if they've established you can tone down the power of a lightsaber. Maybe they'll just make a comic book and be like how talented Luke was, that Obi-Wan was like, yeah, I'll let you train with a live lightsaber on a ship. Like, what can go wrong when you've got no vision? I was like, holy fuck. Guy's going to take out a ship and it's going to make a real short journey. And I didn't mind it, but you touched upon something which I think is true, where it's just repeating steps. We've seen this scene before in A New Hope. We've seen it as their go-to training method. It's like, look, it's the first part of training. You're blind. Use the Force to block the laser bolts. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, do a different session. Like,
that's what I mean.
Give me
like,
something fresh.
That's why I argue for them using like lightsabers and Ahsoka sort of talking us through, instead of having this flashy blind training sequence, have them sort of meditating and being like, and again, like I say, have Ahsoka explain why it's not like using a sword. At least it's something a bit different.
Now,
I just, it's for me, it just dragged away using Bokken, using wooden swords, samurai swords. It just felt like it was dragging away the mysticism. Like the lightsaber is this mystical weapon. There's, the crystal inside it is attuned to the user, isn't it? And it's attuned to the Force. There's some magic to it, and I just felt like it kind of stripped some of that away from me this episode.
I mean, Star Wars theory has issues with bricks. Liam has issue with wood. I get it. But if I look at it, the other issue I had is, why are we wasting time teaching her to use a lightsaber? You're going into a confrontation, potentially a confrontation with people who can use a lightsaber. Why waste time on teaching her to use a close quarters weapon when she has heritage and training in a jetpack and Mandalorian armor? Maybe we should have been training how to avoid close proximity battles.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the whole point in the Mandalorian's toolkit, is to fight Jedi, isn't it? Everything they have, like, like the jetpack is to be able to obviously mimic a Jedi's ability to be able to jump around. The flamethrower is to basically, it's a weapon that a Jedi can't deflect.
Yep.
With a lightsaber. Grappling hook is for the Force to be able to pull people to you. It's that was kind of like in the initial, like, well, not the initial because Boba Fett was the original, but sort of when the Mandalorians were being fleshed out, that was their shtick, was that their armor and their weapons were designed so that they could match Jedi without using the Force.
When you follow that path on, you think, oh wow, how cool would it have been to see a scene where Ahsoka's training with Sabine to like keep her distance, make sure she's sharp, don't get too close. Where it is, okay, you'd be dead now because you've come too close, you've let your emotions get the better of you.
Or Tom, what about she's trying to teach Sabine to fight like a Jedi, and then Sabine does something creative that a Mandalorian would do.
What? I don't know. Using her attributes?
Using her previous training, and sort of showing us, because then that gives us something new. It's like, she's trying to sort of follow the path we've all seen before, but Sabine's got a bit of creativity to her.
Nah, Sabine isn't creative. She doesn't paint or do any of that artistic expression. Shut up. Swing your wooden sword.
Yeah.
Uh, hey, at least they didn't say,
Yeah.
pretend the wooden sword is a paintbrush.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Uh,
I didn't think about it at the time, but now, yeah, I'm surprised that didn't make it in there somehow.
it's
Um,
just, as you say, a lot of this episode felt like we was just rehashing or remixing scenes that we've previously seen in Star Wars. And I had this discussion with my partner, and she says, "What do you want from a Star Wars show or a film?" And I said, "Take a look at Empire Strikes Back. How many beats do they repeat in that compared to A New Hope?
yeah,
Like, if you say, oh, well, there's a TIE fighter chase, but they're drastically different. Like,
yeah, they are. That's my issue with this dogfight in this episode. I know that they don't blow up the ships like they do the TIE fighters in A New Hope, but it's very similar. It's the similar sort of beat and the similar sort of style of dogfight where a cargo ship is trying to outrun
yeah.
fighters, and
Well,
one's on the gun and one's flying the ship. And that's another thing that really bugged me. Has Filoni forgotten that Ahsoka's like a talented pilot? Because she seemed really sort of lackluster and lame in this. Like, oh, I need to let Sabine sort of take charge. It's like, no, Ahsoka, you flew in the Clone Wars. You flew against droids. You know,
yeah.
you flew against these things that are like programmed to be, like skilled fighters and stuff.
It
Um,
it was just a problem of how the scene was set up. It it's written as if that we need something to kill some time. Let's have a 10-minute action sequence that doesn't really do anything. Because we've got a bunch of red shirts for the bad guys. They can be
yeah,
blown up, but we're not gonna hurt Marek or
Shin.
White Eyes. It's like, we're not going to blow these people up. And it takes away any sense of tension. Because if you'd have blown up, like, Shin, I'd be like, damn.
Yeah, ballsy.
Because,
Well, that's
because,
what I want from Star Wars.
but then it would have played into, like, Balin or Ray Stevenson's character being like, okay, the gloves are off now. Like, I thought it was going to be a shame to kill Ahsoka, but this bitch has got to die.
No, I'm totally on board with that. Like, I just want something different. I do like.
Like, one sec. Andor.
Well, Andor is becoming a lot more favorable to me as a show. Like, the more I sit and stew on Andor, the more I sort of see these shows, the more Andor like wins me over. Because Andor has that. Andor achieves what I feel like Ahsoka's trying to achieve a little bit,
I don't think
which is
Ahsoka's
that.
trying.
Yeah, that's the point. But like, I think Andor's really good at doing the politics. It's not quite Game of Thrones level writing, but it's not bad. It's really not bad. Like the how the rebellion, like Andor explores how the rebellion is, the terrorist insurgency side of it and how they get their funds and stuff. And it's done in an interesting way. Like Star Wars, like with this show, it's like they're trying to do a little bit of that, but with the politics and things, but it just falls flat.
Look at it this way.
It's not well written enough to even try politics and try this sort of intricate, schemy plot.
Look at it this way. I've started my Andor rewatch. I'm hoping to have it finished by Tuesday, and I'm looking to make a video on it. I want to make a just long video like the old review stuff I used to do, where I just talk about it, and then we'll do our podcast for it.
Yeah,
and we'll get that back and forth. But what Andor does very differently, because my girlfriend watched it with me, and she was like, okay, like, first 3 episodes for her, well, first one was a bit boring. Second one, she's like, when's it get going? Third one, she's like, okay, something's happening. I was exactly the same on the first watch. On my rewatch, I looked at those 3 episodes rather favorably, because I look at them as a self-contained, like, movie, where those 3 episodes have the beginning, the middle, the end. It's like, great, that's one arc done. I can now watch the next arc, which is the Aldani heist. That's self-contained for the most part. Done. And how they do their storytelling is they expand the world as they go. So we start off on a really constricted world, and then he gets off planet, and we start to get more of Star Wars. We get more stormtroopers, more of the Empire, more of Coruscant, because the more effect he has, the more ripples it has.
Mm.
And it's like, at first, it's just a local event, just no jurisdiction by the Empire. They leave it to some third party security firm. They fuck it up. Empire's like, okay, I've got to take a look at this. And it's like, what's happening? It's happening. Everything's happening. And it's focused on story and character, where you understand motives, backstory for all these characters, why they do what they do. And I think very rarely is there a gratuitous action scene just plugged in because we need an action beat. It's like, here our audience needs a dopamine hit. Someone get the shock paddles and go, action.
That's something I appreciate about Andor. And you kind of, before the later season, you had it in Game of Thrones as well, is that an action beat was always a consequence of, it's a consequence to a character's action. It's not an action beat for the sake of an action beat. Like for example, like in Game of Thrones, like when Jaime fights Brienne, like it's a consequence of him earning her trust a little bit, and her letting her guard down just a tad, just a smidge, and then he's got hold of a sword. It's not just because we need to have this cool action beat. Jaime is planning to escape, and the more him and Brienne sort of talk, the more it's only slightly, but like she lets her guard down just a little bit, and boom, that's the consequence of trust, and that's the consequence of Jaime's like scheming, basically his cunning. Whereas in this, it's action out of nowhere, and it's boring. It's dull.
But there's no consequence. And I'm not saying every action scene has to have a consequence, but when you look at this episode, you think, what happened of consequence? Like, what did happen? We got a retread of a training scene, a retread of a dogfight, and when it comes to story, the only thing of consequence is Harrison Dula isn't allowed to take the Rebel fleet to this location.
Yeah, I'm worried. Me, pal, for Thrawn. I tell you now.
I mean,
if the writing of this show has done anything for me, it's made me really worried about how they're going to deal with Thrawn.
You could just say like they arrived at the planet, and I'm wondering, are they going to stow away on that big ship? Like, we'll find out on Tuesday. But I just think there's more creative ways to do what they've been doing. And it feels paint by numbers using a formula and structure we've seen before. It's like a toolkit. And what I mean by toolkit is like, we need a space fight scene. Okay, I'm going to type this into my Lucasfilm Google search. It's like, oh, you could use this space scene from A New Hope because it kind of fits your parameters. Like, thank you. Insert. I need a training scene for a Jedi. We've only done a few Jedi training scenes, but it mainly revolves around this blast shield mask. Insert that scene. Thank you. It's like we're just doing the same things in different ways, and I hate that it rhymes meme now. That's all I think of, and whenever I see this, and I almost feel like it's a justification for why they do it. And
no, it's not. That's the thing. It's not. Like I got it with the prequels. I didn't like it, but I did sort of understand what George was going for. I understood the mentality behind it. George was trying to do something clever. He wasn't purposely trying to retread nostalgia, if that makes sense. He was trying to do something smart. It didn't pan out that way, but that was his intention. He was trying to do something new, but have like this almost like inverted mirror image of the original trilogy as well. Like, you get that symbolism, and like you say, you get that, like it's poetry, like it rhymes. with the Disney stuff doing it, it's just lazy. It's like, what do people know in Star Wars? Oh, they know this, they know that, so let's use that. It's more laziness rather than trying to be creative.
I think Filoni is hampered by his time spent on the Clone Wars.
Hmm.
Uh, and the reason I say that, when you look at it this way, he had to create a show that was for kids. Like, let's not beat around the bush. There might have been some intense things, but it's literally created for kids. It's on Cartoon
Yeah.
Network. Like, that's the audience. And to keep their attention, you have 20 minutes. You have to have these action beats to keep them engaged. Not here for like, here's 20 minutes of the Senate. It's like, no,
Hmm.
we need an action scene. Like, there has to be an action scene per episode to pay off what we're doing. Uh,
Yeah. I think that might also be a problem with just these shows in general. Is they like Ahsoka is obviously trying to be for kids and also be for older fans, and I just it really is when to get both. It really is like lightning in a bottle.
hmm.
You've really got to do something special. Otherwise, like I think it should just be one or the other. Like I don't know. Like
I,
I'd love to see like Darth Bane. You know, the
hmm,
Darth Bane
yeah.
trilogy. That would be if that was like Disney's first stab at R-rated Star Wars, it'd be massive. I genuinely, hand on my heart, think it would be a huge hit
I think
because of how
uh,
it's written.
Tony Gilroy, I think, would be a good suit for that.
Yeah,
The guy who did Andor, wrote Rogue One, mainly because he could nail Bane's origin, like as
yeah,
this low guy. I'd be curious how he handles the Force because we've not seen Tony Gilroy handle the Force. He's
yeah,
dealt with characters who don't have the Force for the most part.
yeah.
Even Chirrut, like, doesn't really use the Force unless it's to
No, he
beat
kind
up
of just
stormtroopers.
yeah, he just kind of listens to it, doesn't he? It's kind
Yeah.
of like it
Now,
guides him rather than him sort of using it.
how?
Um,
What did you think of their explanation of the Force? Because I don't think I liked it. Where Ahsoka's
in this
like,
episode,
yeah, Ahsoka's saying everyone can feel it, and Sabine asks the obvious, why doesn't everyone use it? And then she gives this line about talent, and I
yeah.
was thinking, ugh,
This is my last thing. This is genuinely like my last note that I've got. I hated it. Um, I I I'm gonna sound really snobby and elitist, but the Force should be something special.
yep,
I think people should. There should be people who are just gifted with it, and I tell you why. Because it makes those who then stand with them and stand against them so much more awesome. Like Thrawn is like for me, Thrawn is legitimately one of the only guys who I would put money on to take down Palpatine. Like if you said to Thrawn, like you've got some military, Palpatine's got some military. Um, Thrawn is just that smart. He's the guy that he would be able to out scheme someone who can see into the future. You know,
mm,
he's that capable of a commander. Boba Fett, in the old lore, he fought Darth Vader to. I'm not going to say to a standstill because there was at the end. It was like Darth Vader could have beaten him, but he gave Darth Vader trouble. You know, and it just makes Obi-Wan and Jango Fett. Jango Fett's awesome. You know, in that fight scene
yeah,
because he recognizes who he's fighting and he does all the right things to combat a Jedi. Like he immediately secures distance,
yep,
uses his range, uses explosives, uses weapons that can catch Obi-Wan off guard. It's awesome. And with this new Ahsoka thing, all I can think is, you're all dumb idiots. Why don't you just learn to use the Force? Just use the Force, guys. You know, learn
like,
to use the Force. Learn to use a lightsaber. You know, you're doing it the hard way. Why are you doing it the hard way? You know, I do. I know that like Ryan Johnson tried to do that message, didn't they? Oh, nobody can be a Jedi too. Nobody can be a gifted Force user and stuff. But I don't like it. I know it sounds really snobby, but yeah, some people have it, some people don't, and
yep,
the people who compete with the people who have it, but and they themselves don't have it, they just made more like Han as well. They're just made more awesome for not having it.
mm,
You know,
just built differently. Hard
yeah,
work, dedication.
But that's what I mean. Like, yeah, I hated that explanation. Disney has been running with that since The Last Jedi, but I'm not going
Yeah.
to say that it comes directly from this show. But it's for me, it's a bad choice. It's like wizards in Harry Potter.
Mm.
You know, can everyone be a wizard if they just think hard enough and try hard enough?
Shut up, you
No,
filthy mudblood.
yeah, exactly. Some people have it, some people don't, and that's that.
It's just how a cookie crumbles, man.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I'm gonna rant about this now, now that we've gone into it. But like with Obi-Wan, like in the old lore, Obi-Wan was not actually that powerful of a Force user. I know in the Disney canon he's now like up there as one of the most powerful Jedi ever, but in the old lore, he wasn't particularly powerful or gifted. He was just really bloody smart. He was really cunning and really tenacious, and that's what made him able to compete with these top tier Jedi and the Sith Lords, and how he defeated Anakin. It was all his head. It wasn't, because he was this gifted, talented Force user. In the old lore, he wasn't even going to be a Padawan until Qui-Gon felt sorry for him. Seriously, that is the old lore. Like, he was going to get sent to like the farms where all the failed Jedi apprentices go, and then Qui-Gon saw him and felt sorry for him. And was like, "I'll take you on."
What a bummer of a story that is, isn't it? It's like, oh, you're useless.
Yeah.
Go to the farms. But anyway, I do have to wrap this up, so gonna skip
Where do you think it's going? Oh, we're gonna skip it.
that because it's the same as last week. Barely anything moved on. I mean, Marek, because the voice they use for him, it's even more of a, is it Ezra? Are we disguising his voice?
That's good with me, mate. I mean the same thing. Just I'm not looking. The only thing that's changed for me now is I think Thrawn's going to be an absolute dumbass.
Oh,
when he
please
shows
no.
up.
Either that or he's going to be so OP.
Yeah,
but he looks.
But he's going to be OP in a he's going to be OP in a cheesy naff way though. It's not going to be like how Tywin comes across as like this scheming mastermind. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be like M. Bison from Street Fighter or something like that.
I think he will be overpowered because protagonists are stupid. Like,
good point.
Going to be like, oh my god, he's doing like 4D chess moves. It's like, bros, you guys don't even know how to play checkers. Like, I'm just beating people up. But yeah, what do you rate this episode?
What a waste of time. I rate it. God, 4 again. What's in there is okay. It's not like it's poorly shot or anything. It's just, again, Ahsoka's in it, so I'll give it a point. Thrawn's mentioned, I'll give it a point. Actually,
that's weak reasoning.
Well,
I was like, Thrawn got a mention, have a point.
I like Sabine a bit more. I'll give it I'm going to give it 3, actually. Screw 4. 3 out of 10. That nothing happens. It's not worth your time.
Yeah.
It's just a waste of time. That's how I felt about this episode. So, yeah.
I would maybe have given it a 5 or a 6, but damn. This is going to be a very schizophrenic season, isn't it? It's either going to be like, if we get one good episode, we're going to be like, it's a 9. Compared to the first 3 episodes or 4 episodes, this is a 9.
Well,
and it's just like, it's a standard affair.
I'm hoping that this is like Andor in the sense that we're building. I'm really hoping that the money's been saved in these early episodes so that we can have something extremely satisfying at the end. But in which case, just don't have these beginning episodes. Have a 4-part series. They used to be a thing.
Mini-series, but I disagree with the Andor comparison. You got to give Andor a bit more respect when you rewatch it and be like, okay.
I've watched Andor twice, and
wow, you're still a klutz then? Like, what the hell?
My feelings on Andor are the ending is fantastic, but to get there is the biggest slog of my life. I was genuinely depressed watching it, but I do appreciate that those last sort of 3 or 4 episodes are spectacular.
I'm never talking to you again.